The Cupertino Teen Commission, the Saratoga Youth Commission, and the Campbell Youth Commission present Pizza and Politics, a political event for teens by teens. Tonight's forum will feature the mayors from the city of Campbell, Cupertino, and Saratoga. State of the Assembly District 28 Q&A with Assemblymember Evan Low. And a California State Senate District 15 debate between candidates Ann Ravel and Dave Cortese. And now for tonight's moderator, Kelly Tung.
Hello and good evening. I would like to welcome you to Pizza and Politics 2020, a political forum for youth by youth. I am Rochelle Jand, a junior at Homestead High School, and I am proud to represent the city of Cupertino as the chair of the Cupertino Teen Commission. Our commission is comprised of 9 teen residents from a variety of backgrounds who represent our city. Our main goals are to advise the city council and staff on issues and projects important to youth. COVID-19 has brought upon new challenges in planning this year's event, but we are pleased to virtually offer this event to everyone.
Hello, everyone. I hope you're all doing well. My name is Drew Kitamuri, a senior at Archbishop Meade High School, and I'm proud to represent the city of Campbell as the chair of the Campbell Youth Commission. We are composed of 15 commissioners who are dedicated to bring about positive change in our community. We are very glad that you're able to attend tonight.
Hi, everyone. My name is Michelle Liu, and I'm a junior at the Harper School. And this year, I'm serving as the chair of the Saratoga Youth Commission, a group of 11 teens who organize events for the youth in our community and advise our city council on prominent to this year's Pizza Politics. And it was great. Kelly Tung, who will be the moderator for tonight.
Thank you all for joining us tonight. My name is Kelly Tung, and I am a sophomore at Monte Vista High School. From 2019 to 2020, I served as the chair of the Cupertino Teen Commission, and tonight, I am happy to serve as your moderator for Pizza and Politics. Pizza and Politics is a political forum for teens by teens. It began in 2012 in the hopes of educating students on the political process and providing them with ways to be more involved with their communities. Although many of you are not able to vote yet, you are already developing the practices of responsible voters, and you should be applauded for taking the time to learn more about the candidates and issues that will be voted upon on election day. If you're 18 or older, we strongly encourage you to register to vote at registertovote.ca.gov. Voting is a way for you to influence local, state, and country policies that can affect you in the future. This year's Pizza and Politics Forum is hosted by the Campbell Youth Commission, Cupertino Teen Commission, and Saratoga Youth Commission. Tonight's event will include 3 rounds of discussion, centering on issues that are relevant to teens in this election cycle. Furthermore, the discussions will cover 2 levels of government, local and state. Before we begin, I would like to discuss some of the ground rules for tonight. Audience members, you are part of this discussion. We encourage you to ask questions by filling out the question form at cupertino.org/pizza. We'll try to get in as many questions as we can. To make the most out of our limited time, we will be consolidating questions that are similar. Please refrain from asking inappropriate questions, as these will be removed as we see fit. Given that this is a forum geared towards youth, we will be taking questions from youth before other audience members. We have breaks scheduled at 6:30 p.m. and 7:10 p.m. To our panelists, you will have 90 seconds to respond to questions. We will have a timer that will help you navigate the time. When you see the 15-second warning, please be respectful of the time and wrap up your answers to avoid going over the 90-second time limit. For our first panel, we'll have the mayors of Campbell, Cupertino, and Saratoga discuss issues affecting youth in their communities. Our speakers tonight include Campbell Mayor Susan N. Landry, Cupertino Mayor Stephen Scharf, and Saratoga Mayor Howard Miller. Mayor Susan Ann Landry has served on the Campbell City Council since 2016. She graduated from California State Polytechnic University Pomona with a bachelor's degree in landscape architecture. As a landscape architect, she specializes in public projects and works with various constituents to develop innovative design solutions. Mayor Stephen Scharf joined the Cupertino City Council in 2016 and served as mayor in 2019 and 2020. He graduated from the University of Florida with a degree in electrical engineering. He has worked in both design and marketing for many Silicon Valley companies, including Xerox, Timeshare, DSC and Estar, and National Semiconductor. He now does embedded systems design. Mayor Howard Miller has served on the Saratoga City Council since 2008 and served as Saratoga's mayor in 2011 and 2015. He holds a Bachelor of Science in Electronic Engineering from Cal Poly San Luis Obispo and a Master of Science in Computer Science from Stanford. Mayor Miller works as an adjunct professor at West Valley College after retiring as Senior Engineering Manager from Apple. Thank you all for joining us tonight. In the interest of time, we ask that you please limit your responses to questions to 90 seconds. For your first question of the night, many of our audience members are teenagers and are not yet eligible to vote in the upcoming election. Why and how can they be involved at the local state of government? What impact can they make on their community? We'll start with Mayor Landry.
Thank you very much for inviting me this evening. So, not only teens, but I encourage everybody to be engaged in the processes that the city goes through. So for teens that are not 18, the things that they can do are get involved, like what you guys are doing on the Youth Commission. They can also come and speak for things like our Planning Commission, our Bike and Pedestrian Commission, and even before City Council. We've had several classes from Prospect High School that the teacher requires them for one time to come in and sit through a council meeting to hear what's going on. So I always encourage everybody to be engaged as much as possible, learn what processes there are in politics, in government approvals, be engaged and have fun while you're doing it, and hopefully you'll learn so when you are 18 and vote, you have a large information background.
Thank you. Mayor Scharf?
Wow, she took the words out of my mouth. So we always have teens come to city council meetings virtually or in person. They're always welcome to speak. I even usually give them a little extra time if they go over. I know it's frustrating to get cut off in the middle of your prepared statement. So I've always been pretty lenient with times. And even if you can't vote, you can do other things. You can volunteer with campaigns of candidates you support. I was always very political as a kid. I was out, protesting the Vietnam War when I was 16 years old. I was helping my friend's father's law partner campaign for U.S. House of Representatives. As the Mayor Landry mentioned, we get people from Prospect High School all the time coming to our city council meetings. And after the meeting, I have to go and sign something that shows they attended. And I think it would be great if the schools in Fremont Union High School District had something similar. It's always strange that everyone coming is from Prospect. So I would encourage our Cupertino schools or Fremont Union High School, 3 of them are in Cupertino, to have some kind of similar program. I think it's a great idea. Thank you.
Thank you. Mayor Miller?
Yeah, Stephen, it's funny. The only students we get, most of the students are from Prospect High School as well. And there's some conflict with Wednesday nights at Saratoga High. So it's always interesting. I just want to leave you with a couple thoughts. On the national level, the national data is that the average voter spends 15 seconds per congressional candidate considering who they vote for. 15 seconds. You have already spent 10 times that amount just listening to us so far. And so you're way ahead. And so you need to keep this in mind. I think being engaged means being knowledgeable. It means being informed. It means understanding who you've elected and what they are doing. Okay, not just reading the colored glossy flyers that come in the mail, because those are almost always exaggerations. And then the second thought I want to leave all the youth with, if one of my residents writes a letter to the editor, it might get published. But if a 16-year-old high school student writes an articulate, on-point letter to the editor, I can almost guarantee you it will be published. So use your voice. We want to hear from you, and you will get published.
Thank you, mayors. Our next question is from the audience. What are the major effects of COVID-19 in your cities? And what has your city been doing to remedy these issues? We'll start with Mayor Miller.
Sure, just a shout out. The founder of Zoom is a Saratoga resident. And so he's never come down to City Hall to tell us how to use Zoom, but we've all figured it out. And so for the students and the youth of Saratoga, it's been pretty tragic. A large part about being a youth is learning how to be with other people and interacting and all this peer and social dynamics. Right now that we don't get to be at school, we've lost a major part of our education. I see it at West Valley College as well. There are students who can be fully engaged in a virtual environment and those who just do not work in that way. And so I am very fearful that we're leaving behind 25% of this generation in this educational format. We've got to figure out how to do better. We have some businesses in our city. Our downtown was greatly affected. We have already lost many businesses. We've tried to put dining out on the street as something new in Saratoga of the last several weeks, and it's been very well received. But the hardship and economic impacts to these small businesses is huge, and we will lose many of them in our city unless people find a way to go frequent them. So please go downtown, go to your favorite restaurant, sit in the street, and buy dinner. There's a ton more, but I'm sure the other mayors will cover all the big points as well.
Thank you. Mayor Sharp.
So Cupertino, we took COVID-19 very seriously right at the beginning of the pandemic. We were very disappointed that the County of Santa Clara did not adopt a face covering requirement, unlike 8 other Bay Area counties. So our city decided to move forward with our own face covering requirement. Now, correlation versus causation is a tough thing to evaluate. But if you look at the infection rates for each city in the county, Cupertino is by far the lowest per capita infection rate. We're about half the infection rate per capita of Saratoga. And demographics are pretty similar. Demographics matter a lot in this, but when you look at cities with similar demographics, you have to wonder why one city is doing much better than the other. So like Saratoga, COVID-19 is affecting our businesses, not only restaurants, but hotels. The hotel revenue is probably close to maybe 5% of what it was, and we depend on hotel taxes to help fund our city. So we've been helping businesses and individuals try to get through this financially, but as you know, the city doesn't have unlimited funds to do that. So we're doing the best we can, and we're going to have to adjust to the new normal because I don't think things are going back to the way they were for a very long time. Thank you.
Thank you. Mayor Landry.
Oh, yes, thank you. So your first question was, what major effects have COVID had on our city? Well, let me start by saying our budget is 3 things: a portion of property tax, sales tax, and hotel tax. So when this hit and businesses shut down in the last quarter of the year, our fiscal year, which was April to June, we had a $4.4 million budget deficit. When the things started to happen and we shut down the city, we declared a state of emergency. And by declaring that emergency, we qualify for FEMA loans and other potential funding sources. We had to redirect how City Hall was operating. We did shut down planning and building for a while. We had to develop new staffing protocols about how to work from home. We then changed our code enforcement priorities so that businesses that, say, a restaurant were selling groceries wouldn't be shut down, that they were allowed to work outside of their normal permit. We also went virtual with Parks and Recreation, our museum, and our library.
Thank you. Our next question from the audience is, I'm an avid mountain biker and would love to see more support in the community. What's the best way to lobby local government to expanding trail access and building new trails for bike? We'll start with Mayor Landry.
Well, thank you very much. As a landscape architect, I designed trails along creeks. I worked on the San Tomas Aquino Creek Trail from the bay up to Monroe, and where there's a staging area. So trails and bicycling is a big thing for me. First thing is understand the regulations. There's Caltrans standard for class designations for different types of bikeways. There's a class 1, where that's usually what's along a creek. It's isolated from traffic or grade separated. Class 2 is the striped lane that you see along this roadway. And class 3, which is really more a route, as you may see the little chevrons in the street. So the first thing to abdicate, understand what you're abdicating for. Understand why there's constraints and limitations regarding safety, access, handicap access, bicycle access. And then go to committees like the Parks and Rec Commission. We have a Bicycle and Pedestrian Commission. We also have a lot of master plans that show build out of numerous trails. So basically educate yourself so when you go and speak before our city or any other agency, you are speaking from an informed, educated position.
Thank you. Mayor Sharp?
So I enjoy mountain biking too. I think in this case, lobbying the cities may not be the best approach. You may want to be lobbying organization like the Mid-Peninsula Open Space District to expand the number of trails that are open to bicycles. I know there's always been a conflict between hikers and mountain bikers, and some areas have worked things out. They've done alternate weekends where the trails are closed to mountain bikers on alternate weekends, although hikers can be there all the time. And it's tough. I know over at Fremont Older, where I go occasionally, that there have been conflicts between the hikers and the cyclists. So I think the key thing in getting more stuff open is the cyclists need to behave responsibly, and I see that is mostly the case. And there are areas that I go to where they're not very popular for people hiking, like Wilder Ranch and Santa Cruz. I enjoy climbing up to the top to UC Santa Cruz campus and then flying down. Unfortunately, when it's foggy, you can fog up your glasses. I had a nasty crash and I was by myself. So yeah, lobby your open space districts, I think, is the best option, because a lot of cities, maybe other than Palo Alto, don't have a lot of control over the land that would be appropriate for mountain biking. Thanks.
Thank you, Mayor Sharp. Mayor Miller?
First, a nod to the city of Cupertino. Saratoga had the #1 position for infection rate up until the middle of June, and darn it, Cupertino did pass us, and I just looked it up. So congratulations, but the second least infected city is Saratoga. Yes, us mayors are very competitive, okay? So Saratoga, you guys got the background. I think Steve's comments are great. Midpin does have a whole bunch of mountain biking stuff. They 4 years ago completed the John Nicholas Trail out of the back of Sanborn. You can get onto it. And I know the trail well because I'm not a mountain biker, I'm a trail runner. And I can beat most bikers going uphill. And some of them going downhill on those super windy ones. But locally in Saratoga, we're just going to open in the first week of November, the Saratoga to the Sea Trail, 60 years in the making. We just completed the last 3.4 mile segment out of the back of Saratoga. Unfortunately, the terrain and the way that the trail is laid out is not suitable for mountain bikers. But we are working on our open space and our circulation elements, which are part of our general plan. and those are going to wrap up early in 2021. So you can go to the Saratoga website and find out about our general plan updates. And in those plans is where we talk about opportunities for more bike lanes, be all the classes that Susan talked about. So go to the website, get involved with the general plan. That's the most direct way to change the future in Saratoga.
Thank you. Our next question is, what is your stance on police reform, and how is your city responding to inequality and bias in our justice system? We'll start with Mayor Miller.
Sure. Saratoga has in it West Valley College, and West Valley College is the preeminent junior college in the state of California for people entering the law enforcement profession. We have the highest success rate at the police academy for San Jose for the State Highway Patrol. So we have a lot of educators within our city that are heavily engaged in understanding the law enforcement models and police reform. And so I believe there are things that you can do at the end of the system, but I think that there's a lot of attention that needs to be paid at the front of the system. The type of people, the type of backgrounds, the type of education that they're given to go into the law enforcement system. I think there's an old school model from the 50s of police being enforcers, and I think the forward-looking model is police being supporters. And the role of a policeman in Saratoga, we don't really have a lot of crimes. So they spend a lot of time doing investigations, but there aren't many muggings and beatings. And so they do spend a significant amount of their time helping the citizenry. Our citizens are used to that. But if you live in another sort of city, I came from near Richmond, California, the police mostly have to be enforcers because there's so many other social issues going on. And so we need to mend the dynamic between the public and the police. We need to adjust the role to be more of helpers and guiders than just enforcers.
Thank you. Mayor Scharf?
Unmute. So like Saratoga, we contract with the Santa Clara County Sheriff for law enforcement. One advantage of that, Cupertino and Saratoga have extremely low per capita policing costs. But looking at other cities and even ours, the issue is the police have been called on to do way too many things as other services have been defunded. So they need to be mental health experts, experts in homelessness, experts in domestic abuse. They get called on for neighbor disputes when we have one person complaining that their neighbor put some potted plants across the property line, and they call the police to come out for that. And the issue is there's so many other services that used to exist to address these issues, and they've been slowly defunded, and the police have had to deal with these. So long term, when I hear defund the police, I think there's something to that. But when you defund the police, you have to fund all these other services and then let the police do what they were designed to do, stop crimes, investigate crimes, and let all these other agencies deal with things that really may not require a police officer to come out. But it's a misnomer to think it's going to cost us less to do that. It's going to actually end up costing us more. Thanks.
Mayor Landry?
Yes, thank you. I agree with what the other two mayors have stated, and I think I'll highlight what Mayor Miller said, is it's the culture that is created in the department. And the culture sets the tone for the behavior of the rest of the department. Campbell is on the high end of excellence when it comes to how we deal with our community. Our majority of our heavy crimes are people that flee San Jose and drive across the street and are captured in Campbell. So if you're looking to deal with police reform, you also need to identify what the problems are. In the last 7 years, we've had 2 officers that there has been a complaint filed against them. And both of them it was very minor in the situation, but we don't get a lot of complaints. We've also looked at other social services things, and I am proud to announce that we have a canine officer dog named Lucas. We are getting a second canine dog officer dog. And the goal of these is to keep our officers out of harm's way and allow these dogs to come and help the situation. But the other part of the dog's job is to go out into the community and help kids have comfort dogs, and also show that the police do have a sensitive side to them.
Thank you. We are now coming close to an end to this section tonight. This will now be your last question and your closing statement. What question do you wish you had been asked tonight, and why? We'll start with Mayor Landry.
I was on mute and I took it off. Okay, so I would hope that kids would start asking about what planning is being done in the future. Mayor Miller mentioned the general plan. These are plans that establish the framework for how the city will be built out. And a lot of people don't understand what a general plan is, and I wish you had asked the question so that we could have described why it's so important and what is needed to be put in there. Housing is a big element right now, and where it goes and how the state has overridden our local jurisdiction. Traffic is another issue. And one thing that's very important right now is our climate action plan that we're working on. So I would like to have you asked about that. And in closing, I just want to really thank you all for inviting me to participate. You guys are very well organized. You are very professional. I've seen more professional presentation out of you right now than I've seen out of a lot of council meetings. And I think it's great that you guys are engaging in the political process at an early age. And go for it. Think big. Who knows? Maybe a bunch of these women will be presidents someday.
Thank you. Mayor Scharf?
A question about sustainability would have been good. It's on my mind because yesterday at the League of California Cities virtual conference, Cupertino received what's called the Vanguard Platinum Award for Sustainability Greenhouse Gas Reduction. There's only 4 cities in the state that have ever received this, and Cupertino is the only one for 2020. So many things come back to sustainability, and it's something that we can all really have an effect on. If I go out and hang my clothes on my clothesline instead of turning on the gas dryer, it doesn't really take much more time, but I've had a positive effect. If I ride my bike to Trader Joe's or to City Hall instead of hopping in the car, which is a little easier, it has an effect. And we're setting examples for others to do the same. So tomorrow I have a sustainability forum, so I'm probably getting ready for that now. But I think it's an issue that the youth are really involved in, and it's really your future. It's so important for our planet to look to a sustainable environment, and we're trying to do more in Cupertino. We want to do something about single-use plastics, which is a very big issue. And looking forward, we already have that on our work plan, and we'll be looking at it later, probably early next year. So thank you. And it was a great forum, better than the other one I was in today. Thank you.
Thank you. Mayor Miller?
Yeah, the one thing that troubles me the most, and I have come to a different opinion over my 12 years as an elected official, is systemic inequality. We talk about systemic racism, systemic inequality, and you asked a very specific question about the police. And I think that's a backwards looking question. I want to give you a quote, and it was a well-meaning quote. A superintendent of a nationally known school district said, "We are protecting the quality of education in our schools by making sure that only the right people come to our schools." Does that not sound like, in my city, preserve Saratoga? Right? Where our schools are going to be overcrowded if we build affordable housing. Does this not sound like some people maybe in Cupertino or Campbell? In our very cities, we would rather close our elementary schools. Blue Hills is on the chopping block, so in Cupertino Union. Every single one of our schools has lost one kindergarten and one first grade class since I've moved to Saratoga. We would rather close our kindergarten classrooms, then allow affordable housing to be built in our city. And I think we need to look at the systemic issues that are keeping families, working class families, from living in our cities and how we can define the futures of our own cities rather than letting the state of California define the futures of our city. And that quote, by the way, was 1959, and it was Selma, Alabama. It might as well have been 2020 in Saratoga, California, because we need to understand how we're part of the problem and not allowing equality in society. So there it is. It's a hard challenge for everybody to think outside the box, but I leave you with that.
Thank you. Thank you, Mayor Landry, Mayor Scharf, and Mayor Miller for joining us tonight. We will now take a short break and return at 6:35 p.m. with Assemblymember Evan Low.
The COVID-19 pandemic has brought huge public health challenges. CDC is preparing for both flu and COVID-19 to spread this fall and winter. Everyone has an important role to play this flu season. If you have to be out and about for your job as an essential worker or to make a trip to the grocery store or your doctor's office, take action to protect yourself and others from respiratory illnesses like flu and COVID-19. Mask up. Wear a mask over your nose and mouth. When in public, keep a distance of at least 6 feet between yourself and others when you can. Lather up. Wash your hands often with soap and water. If soap and water aren't available, use an alcohol-based hand sanitizer. And roll up your sleeve and get your annual flu vaccine. This season, a flu vaccine is more important than ever to reduce the risk of flu for yourself, your family, and your community. It can also reduce the burden of flu illness on the healthcare system and save medical resources to care for people with COVID-19. The more people vaccinated, the more people protected. Get your flu vaccine to protect yourself and your loved ones. To learn more, visit cdc.gov/flu.
The City of Cupertino proudly presents 2019 Crest Award winner Audrey Sway in the category of Volunteer of the Year.
My favorite thing about art is bringing things to life that don't exist and really distilling my mind's abstractions onto paper. And as many people say, art is a really great way to just express yourself. Hi, I'm Audrey Tsui, and I'm the 2019 Volunteer of the Year. I've been taking art lessons at Honging Art since I was 6, and they've been a huge part of my life ever since. So it started off as art lessons, but soon they started a teacher's assistant program where they had students basically helping other students. And that gave me a huge confidence boost. And they've also given me a lot of guidance in my life and in pushing me to try out new things and just pushing me past my comfort zone. So when I started volunteering at Sunnyview Retirement Center, when they were giving me the tour around the retirement center, they just mentioned really quickly that a couple years back, someone was leading art workshops, but she graduated, so the art workshops no longer existed. One day, I just randomly thought, wait, if they used to have art workshops, I can start this again. I can also add my own touch to this. As the volunteer outreach director at Honging Art, the main thing I do is manage art workshops at various senior retirement centers. So for the Sunnyview Retirement Center art workshops, I also got a bunch of students at Hoeing Art to come over and help me lead these workshops. And this gave them a great opportunity for interacting with senior citizens, which they might not have the opportunity to do so in their daily lives. And this intergenerational exchange would be a really great opportunity for them as well, in addition to brightening up a bunch of senior citizens' lives at the same time. So I definitely want to continue volunteering because my community has helped me in several ways. For example, Hoeing Art has given me confidence and has pushed me past my comfort zone throughout my life. And I want to be able to help other people in similar ways.
Welcome back to Pizza and Politics. My name is Kelly Tung, a sophomore at Monte Vista High School and former chair of the Cupertino Teen Commission. During our first round of discussions, we focused on local issues with the mayors of Campbell, Cupertino, and Saratoga. For our second round, we'll be talking with State Assemblymember Evan Low, a Pizza and Politics veteran. Before he was elected to the State Assembly in 2014, Assemblymember Low served as the mayor of the Campbell City Council. Assemblymember Low is running again for the State Assembly's District 28 seat, which represents Cupertino, Campbell, Saratoga, and other areas of Santa Clara County. Assemblymember Low is being challenged by Republican candidate Mr. Carlos Rafael Cruz. Before we begin, Assemblymember Low is going to give us a brief overview of what is happening in District 28, and then we will begin our Q&A. On to you.
Greetings, and thanks so very much, Kelly, and thanks to all who are joining us for Pizza and Politics. A special recognition to the incredible staff that worked behind the scenes to make this possible and so seamless. We also want to recognize the importance of our engaged youth. Oftentimes it's said you are the future, but no, you're in fact the present. And no better sense of that this coming November, 25 some odd days away, to which you can also think about a statewide proposition, which is that of Proposition 18, to allow for those who will be 18 years of age by the general election to vote in primaries. What an incredible way to ensure that young people can exercise their right to vote. But again, I've stopped off safely here in a parking lot on my way from Sacramento back home to the South Bay to be able to join you here tonight because of the importance of having dialogue within our democracy. What's increasingly important as well is to recognize what government is about and what democracy is about. Oftentimes you'll hear that politics is a dirty word or that it's polarizing, when in fact we realize that our democracy is indeed fragile. And it's okay to have disagreements. It's okay to debate issues. But what is also increasingly important to remember is that we are all trying to do the best that we can to be invested in each other's shared success and participate in our democratic process. It is our obligation, it is our duty to be active citizens, and I hope that we'll be reminded of that each and every day. So it's a pleasure to be with you here. Thanks so much, Kelly.
All right. We are now going to begin the Q&A portion. I would like to remind all audience members that these speakers are here tonight to engage you. So have your questions ready. If you have a question, just type your question into our form at cupertino.org/pizza. Thank you, Assemblymember Low, for joining us tonight. In the interest of time, we ask that you please limit your responses to questions to 90 seconds. To kick things off, please tell us about yourself, your experience, and why you should be reelected as the State Assembly member for District 28.
Thanks, Kelly. I was born and raised in this community, in this district. I've lived in this district I represent my entire life. And what's important is that we recognize the struggles that we have in the state of California and trying to advance the issues for all people. And in particular, my message tonight will be to that of our Gen Z and the current young generation to ensure that we have access to affordable housing, that we have access to healthcare, that we recognize that climate change is real, and that when we see the record global temperatures 5 consecutive years, that means something. And we in the state of California will take action, and we will recognize and be the leader in the nation with respect to climate change. These are all the issues to help empower the younger generation, because let's face it, you'll have a tougher time than previous generations. But as millennial, I recognize that, and I will continue to be a champion for everyone.
Thank you. Our first question for you today is, ACA 5 is a constitutional amendment that will be on California voters' November ballot. This amendment will repeal Proposition 209 and allow universities in California to bring back affirmative action during college admissions. You recently voted yes on ACA 5. Can you tell us why you voted in favor of the amendment?
Absolutely. This is to repeal Proposition 209, which I believe I was approximately 13 years old during this time, to which a number of viewers may or may not have been alive yet to help recognize the importance of this issue. This is to ensure that we recognize that there is racial disparities and injustice within the system, the institutional discrimination that exists, and how do we proactively rectify the injustices, the institutional injustices that we see with respect to the public sector. And that's what this conversation is about. That's why we've seen bipartisan support on this issue. And yes, let us recognize that this is a difficult conversation about race, about sharing power, but that's what our democracy is about. And if anything shows us with respect to the issue on the George Floyd killing and the unconditional allyship that is required for us to live in a democracy and helping lift up all communities, that's what this conversation is about. That's why I made the decision to support it in the legislature, and that's why I enthusiastically support it now.
Thank you. This is a question from our audience. What will you commit to do in order to be an advocate for and defender of citizens' privacy rights and civil liberties? Do you accept donations from telecommunications companies?
Thank you. I've been a champion for all the issues with respect to individual privacy and the protections that exist for all consumers. It's important that we, again, in the state of California, recognize that we have a unique opportunity, specifically in Silicon Valley, which is to say that we recognize the innovation that occurs, the innovation and the technologies that exist for us to thrive, while also making sure that we prioritize consumer protection. And that's why I'm honored by the capacity and position I have as the chairman in the Assembly Committee of the Business and Professions Committee, which is that of the utmost priority of consumer protection. With respect to campaign finance, it is such that I receive campaign contributions from a wide variety of businesses, including that of the tech company, that of Silicon Valley. And I'm proud of the support that I have and representing all of us in Sacramento.
Thank you. Your next question is, California schools are among the nation's most underfunded. California spends significantly less per student than most of the other states, which greatly affects the education that our students receive. There has also been a cut in the budget for UCs as well. What steps are you taking to solve this problem and to help give students a better education?
Kelly, it's dawned on us, and we should know this, that we live in a community and environment in which we have one of the most valuable companies, if not one, number two, most valuable companies in the world, known as Apple. And yet in the Cupertino School District, 5 consecutive years of cuts, and now proposals looking like may have to shut down some schools and or share principals and or other staff. At the same time, there was a revenue measure for the Cupertino School District to raise revenues to be able to pay for the essential school services for the Cupertino School District. And unfortunately, that was voted down. So I will speak truth to power, which is to say that if we value our community, if we value our school district, then we must recognize the importance of basic budgeting. And what you referenced is that we are, of course, at the local level, always starved, and we must do better in terms of local control. So because the electorate our electorate in Cupertino shot down revenue measures to keep the school district sustainable, it's important that we look for alternative sources for reform and also different funding formulas from the state. And that's what we'll continue to do. But what we need to recognize is also the inequities that exist. And should big corporations pay their fair share? And I say yes. And that's why I'm also in favor of Proposition 15, which ensures that we close the loophole to ensure that our major corporations pay their fair share as we all do as individual citizens.
Thank you. Our next question is from the audience. What do you think is the most overlooked issue in today's government?
I'd say that of what my passion is, and that is that of civic engagement and elections. That's why I prioritized that of the issue that we have with us on Proposition 18, civic engagement. When I talk to most people about what an assembly member does or what a supervisor does, we recognized that during that of the COVID pandemic, what a county health officer had and the immense authority that a county health officer had with respect to shutting down businesses and allowing them to open. And then individuals became aware of what a board of supervisor was. And so that's why I'm very passionate when we talk about civics. So what I think is overlooked is our commitment to ensuring that we are engaged in our public dialogue, civic engagement, and our discourse. That's why, again, I am passionate about ensuring that we instill lifelong habitual learning of voting and engagement for young people. And again, that's Proposition 18. That's why I have proposals for Election Day holiday to make Election Day a holiday in the state of California to ensure that all people will take an opportunity to engage and exercise their right to vote and hold public representatives like me accountable to people like you. So again, it's about civic engagement. That's what I think is overlooked. We must reinvest in our democracy.
Thank you. Our next audience question is, are there any upcoming votes or proposed bills that will put measures in place to prevent fires? What is your opinion on inmates working as firefighters for low wages?
Thanks, Kelly. Yes, I was proud to support and be part of the legislative proposals to allow for those that you referenced earlier to get into that of the fire service. And that was a law that was just signed into law by Governor Newsom by my colleague, Assemblywoman Eloise Reyes. And yes, we will see proposals, additional proposals for wildfire relief, but we also need to recognize the importance of federal engagement, that less than 20% of the forests in open space are that of state lands. Much of it is private and federal lands. So we must partner and recognize that engagement and the partnership that is required for this. Unfortunately, we also recognize this as a new norm, but we should be expecting better. And that's why when we think about the federal administration, they can print money overnight. We, unfortunately, in the state of California, we don't have that luxury of printing money overnight. And we must constitutionally balance the budget. We cannot go bankrupt. We constitutionally must balance our budget. And again, that's why we will rely on our federal partners to advocate for the infrastructure and the resources to address this climate change issue with respect to wildfires.
Thank you. A lot of our audience members will be heading off to college in the coming years. They will hopefully graduate, probably incur debt from student loans, and maybe land a well-paying full-time job. However, they have to face something most American teenagers do not, the highest cost of living in the country. How are you planning to address affordable housing?
Yeah, Kelly, when we've seen reports that individuals may need the median, it's a range. One needs to earn close to $275,000 to live in our region, here just in Cupertino. And that's a challenge. Kelly, did you know that the governor, the chief executive for the fifth largest economy in the world, that is Gavin Newsom, the governor, does not qualify and make $275,000. And yet, when we think about the challenges, don't feel sorry for the governor, but think about the generations that you're part of, that you're letting up to your end of the bargain, and yet you're set up for failure, not for success. And that's why I'm so deeply passionate about ensuring that we have access to affordable housing. And we need to reframe this notion of protectionism that previous generations, we've had it, so therefore we don't want others to have it. This notion of single family zoning. We must have a wide variety of this. And oftentimes it is controversial. And it's fair, I recognize that. But if we recognize that this is a supply and demand issue, how are we collectively doing our part? And therein lies part of the challenge that exists between the state and local control. And again, I come from local government, now I'm wearing a state hat, and there lies part of that tension. But let us address this issue at hand to encourage as much access as possible.
Thank you. Your next question is, sorry, give me 1 second. If re-elected, how will you continue to engage with the youth in District 28?
Well, as a millennial, as one of the younger members of the legislature, you've seen my passion. That is, we have Proposition 18 because of something that I've tried to propose three times in a row. And it wasn't successful the first time, which was my proposals to encourage 17-year-old voting, which we see now in Proposition 18, so long as they are 18 by the general election. I think you have joined along, in which I've brought up youth commissioners to the state capitol to ensure that we hopefully instill a sense of civic participation and maybe inspiring new people, younger generations to say, I too want to run for a local office as a city council member and as a mayor. That is my passion because I recognize that. That's why I got involved, Kelly, which was that I didn't feel like the system supported young people and that I too have struggled to put food on the table. I too struggled to be able to afford to live in the community that I was born in. So when we recognize that that is just so inherent in who I am, that this is my community and these are the values that I share, I'm hopeful that individuals will know of my intentions, of my integrity. And again, it's okay to disagree, but at least you know where we're coming from and that I'll always have an open door to have dialogue.
Thank you. Your next question is, what specific steps will you take to improve the public health and welfare of all Californians?
I have a proposal on universal basic income. Kelly, this was a crazy idea before, but this notion of the first piece of legislation that I proposed on universal basic income, which is that every Californian, every citizen should be entitled to that of basic income. And we've seen elements of basic income in the federal stimulus as a result of the COVID pandemic. That is to say that Republicans, Democrats all supported basic income. We've seen key elements of this in the number of pilots throughout the country. And we have seen a number of proposals, even in the state of California as pilots. We've seen them in Stockton, and we've seen the mayor of Long Beach and Los Angeles and others supporting this. But that is my proposal, to ensure that we have basic income so that everyone has a basic floor to be able to have the decency as a Californian and as an American citizen.
Thank you. You mentioned how you were advocating for sustainability, and many residents and students in these cities have been hoping to see reduced traffic and overall gas emissions. How are you planning on increasing sustainability and fostering any alternative transportation options?
When we think about that of transportation options, we need to be innovative, which is why we need to revamp and reform how we get into our cars and look at the future. That's why we need to really take a look closely at the high-speed rail proposal that, by the way, was supported by the electorate. Again, let me repeat that. It was supported, funding was supported by the electorate. We need to make sure that there is fiscal responsibility in the development because it's about the future. Every other industrialized country has some elements of high-speed rail, but that's the direction that we need to go in, especially in the direction of California, where we want to get rid of fossil fuels and focus on the renewables. That's the direction that we need to head in, and that's the direction that we must invest in.
Thank you. Like the generations before us, Generation Z is highly political. How do you suggest that Gen Z kids get involved in state or city politics?
Get an internship, find opportunities to be on social media and stay connected. Tweet at me, tweet at your local representatives, meet with them, get to know who they are, because you'll find out after the exterior of a politician, they are normal, regular people just like everyone else. They are your mothers, your fathers, your cousins, your friends, your neighbors. We are just like everybody else. So stay connected. And then lastly, focus that on Proposition 18, on how young people can be empowered. It's not just lip service, not just rhetoric, but an actual opportunity for young people, teenagers, to exercise their right to vote. So I'm hopeful that you'll continue to do that. I know that my time is very limited, and as you can see, it's getting dark now. So I want to be respectful of your time, but I'm so grateful for the time that you've provided me to have dialogue. And I'm so passionate and encouraged and optimistic about the next generation. I won't be here forever, and I'm inspired by the next generation of young people who will take the mantle and make our community proud.
Thank you. And don't worry, we still have 15 minutes, so we're not pressed for time for now. But now, if reelected, are there any bills that you aim to champion for or push through the Assembly?
Yes, I referenced it earlier, which is that of making Election Day a holiday. Did you know that close to half of the states in the nation already has this in law, which is that they made Election Day a holiday to encourage as much participation as possible. But we in California don't have that in law. And so we have had a history of the direction of the state encouraging access to entry. Whereas in other states, they're increasing barriers by having voter ID laws. Whereas in California, we already had automated voter registration at 16 and 17, prepaid postage on your absentee ballots, again, encouraging that of the youth vote. And now I want to make sure that we empower by making Election Day a holiday in the state of California.
Great, thank you. We're now coming close to the end of this section tonight. This will be your last question and your closing statement. What question do you wish you had been asked tonight, and why?
Well, I wish I would be asked as to the question of why is politics seemingly so divisive? And my answer to that would be that think about our democracy. Or think about a different system of government. In what other system of government other than a democracy to which you can exercise your right to your voice and your opinion so openly without repercussion? That is the obligation that we have. So naturally, our democracy is fragile, and it's important that we engage in this process. Yes, of course, it is sometimes messy, but it's important that we engage as much as possible. It's our obligation, and it's our duty to be able to do so. And I hope that we'll think about politics and government in a different way.
Thank you so much. We will now take a break and we'll return later with candidates for the California State Senate's District 15 seat.
If you have to be out and about for your job as an essential worker or to make a trip to the grocery store or your doctor's office, take action to protect yourself and others from respiratory illnesses like flu and COVID-19. Mask up. Wear a mask over your nose and mouth. When in public, keep a distance of at least 6 feet between yourself and others when you can. Lather up. Wash your hands often with soap and water. If soap and water aren't available, use an alcohol-based hand sanitizer. And roll up your sleeve and get your annual flu vaccine. This season, a flu vaccine is more important than ever to reduce the risk of flu for yourself, your family, and your community. It can also reduce the burden of flu illness on the healthcare system and save medical resources to care for people with COVID-19. The more people vaccinated, the more people protected. Get your flu vaccine to protect yourself and your loved ones. To learn more, visit cdc.gov/flu.
The City of Cupertino presents 2018 Crest Award winner Inna Talent in the category of Organization of the Year.
My name is Aina Aroda. I'm 17 years old and I've lived in Cupertino my whole life. Inner Talent actually began out of a history of volunteering. I was 14 when I started volunteering at a senior center in Palo Alto, and initially I had just been there to clean dishes and spend time with the seniors, and I had a lot more free time. It was the beginning of high school, and so I was dancing a lot. So I would always talk about my adventures at dance class, and one of the frequent questions was, when can we see you? When can we see you? Me and my mom made that happen. We asked the senior center if it would be okay if I came and performed one time, and thankfully they allowed me to, and the reaction was really overwhelmingly positive. Again, I was 14, 15. I didn't know what a 501c3 was, so my mom was really helpful. She kind of got the ball rolling with the paperwork and gave me the reins for the creative aspect. She did the logistical aspect, and from there it was just history, and a talent was born. I reached out to one of my friends, and we both led it together. My mom knew someone. She had a little son, maybe 4 or 5 years old, and it was just basically the three of us. Now, 2 years later, we've got around 40 to 50 independent volunteers, and we've partnered with a bunch of schools, dance schools, singing schools, who have bought into our ideology and our philosophy. Basically, our nonprofit organization goes out to senior centers and puts on a 45-minute to an hour and a half performance anywhere once a month, and we just put on that kind of entertainment for them to break free of the routine, mundane lifestyle. I've been doing Indian classical dance since I was 2.5 to 3 years old, and many of them, being however old they are, have never seen anything like that in their life. So it seems like a perfect handshake where it's a symbiotic relationship where we're both kind of benefiting each other in different ways. It leaves good feelings in everyone's hearts.
Welcome back. My name is Kelly Tung, a sophomore at Monte Vista High School and former chair of the Cupertino Teen Commission. For our final round, we have Santa Clara County Supervisor Dave Cortese and Ann Ravel. The two Democratic candidates are running for the State Senate's District 15 seat, which represents Cupertino, Campbell, Saratoga, and other areas of Santa Clara County. A state senator is in charge of creating and voting on legislation that either changes existing laws or makes new ones. Before we begin, our candidates are here tonight to engage the youth audiences watching from Campbell, Cupertino, and Saratoga. So, have your questions ready. If you have a question after we open it up for discussion, simply type your question in the form at cupertino.org/pizza. Thank you, Supervisor Cortese and Ms. Ravel, for joining us tonight. In the interest of time, we ask that you please limit your responses to questions to 90 seconds. To start, please tell us about yourselves, your experience, and why you should be the next state senator for District 15. We'll start with Supervisor Cortese.
Well, thank you so much for inviting me. I'm so happy to be here, and it's been an exciting campaign for me all along. You know, I was raised here all the way back to the agricultural days as a young person, you know, working in the orchards and growing up in that kind of an environment, and then seeing, you know, the growth and the change to an urbanized environment in what we now call Silicon Valley. So it's been a great perspective. And As I became of age and started my own career, my business career, I ran for school board, and I served on the Eastside High School District Board of Trustees, which was a tremendous experience for 8 years. And I led the effort to build the first new high school in Silicon Valley in 25 years, Evergreen Valley High School at that time. So I had a wonderful experience working with the community. I went on to serve on the San Jose City Council, including 2 years as vice mayor of San Jose. And then in 2008, the year President Obama was first elected, I was elected to the Board of Supervisors. And I've been serving there for 11 and a half years and working on many of the issues we'll be talking about today: climate, housing, homelessness, justice reform, and issues like education, which we still work on a great deal at the county. So I'm excited for the opportunity to work in the state Senate. I feel that those credentials and that work I've done, particularly the last 11 and a half years in the county, prepare me to land on my feet running. And I look forward to working with you all there.
Thank you. Ms. Ravel, please tell us about yourself, your experience, and why you should be elected as the state senator for District 15.
Thank you very much, and thank you all for being here. I have worked at every single level of government, both at the county level as the county council, I'm a lawyer, as well as the federal government, appointed by and working with President Obama twice in the White House, actually, and President Obama has endorsed me, and also appointed by Jerry Brown to the California Fair Political Practices Commission. I grew up in Chile and moved here when I was 11 to San Jose, and I actually worked in the fields because I needed to get money to go to college. And that is something that you could do in those days, and people in your generation, unfortunately, can't. And so I was very fortunate to be able to come from a low-income background and yet be able to be appointed by the President of the United States twice. In all of my jobs, I've used my public service career to work for the people. And I don't bend to the power of a single group or a single industry. And what I've done is written legislation, started programs that help children, students go against big corporations. And I've written legislation in the state legislature, which my opponent has not.
Thank you. Our first question for tonight is, climate change has become a growing concern for many Californians, including many teens who are worried about the long-term consequences of some of the current practices and policies. What would you do to prevent climate change and create a more sustainable environment if you become a state senator? Sorry, we'll start with Ms. Ravel.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it. Clearly, climate change issues are at a crisis level, and we have to step up what we need to do. For one thing, I would support and insist on sustainable farming, more electrification, more wind and solar, and that the state should be investing together with private industry in more batteries that can actually keep that wind and solar power in a way that it can be usable, so we don't have to worry about the electric grid. I also believe in increasing green spaces, planting more trees, and I early on in this campaign was the first to actually sign the pledge, the climate pledge, that I would not be involved in fracking. And that is because when I was at the Department of Justice for President Obama, I oversaw the oil spill in the Gulf, and I flew over in a Navy plane, observed the oil bubbling up and all of the destruction of the coast and New Orleans through that oil spill. And I went after BP and made them pay for it. And that's what I would be doing strongly in the legislature.
Thank you. Mr. Cortese?
No, thank you. I've had this tremendous opportunity to work on climate issues going all the way back to my time as vice mayor of the city of San Jose, where we rolled out something called the Green Vision, which became a national model for cities, municipal governments in terms of climate and stewardship goals, environmental stewardship goals. And I got to the County Board of Supervisors, I co-authored the county's first climate stewardship goals. I'm very honored in this campaign to have the sole endorsement of Sunrise Silicon Valley. I'm also endorsed by the Sierra Club, the League of Conservation Voters, and other environmental groups. And I think part of that is because of the work that I've had the opportunity to do at the county. I called for the first solar farms in Santa Clara County to be created by county government. They are now 4 huge solar farms that the county owns, the largest energy storage contract for solar energy with Bloom Energy of a public sector company in California, a public sector entity, the county. These are all efforts that I led or helped lead. Probably the most exciting thing I had an opportunity to do was to go out and visit Vice President Al Gore's Climate Reality Project and convince them to join in with us to create a county climate coalition, because we were seeing what's happening in Washington, D.C., where there hasn't been action, and we didn't trust there would be action to get cities and counties and communities to commit to 100% renewable and to commit to the right kind of goals. And that coalition is growing. We have cities and counties all over the country, particularly counties that are part of that. So I've had a great opportunity, including speaking at the UN last year. I want to continue that work when I get to the California legislature. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next question is from the audience. Currently, Democrats hold a supermajority in both houses, as well as the governorship. What issues do you feel you need to work in a bipartisan manner with Republicans, and which ones do you think are too important to compromise? We'll start with Supervisor Cortese.
Well, I think there's a lot of issues. Most issues the public would like us to see us work in a bipartisan way, to move California forward. That's the first goal, to bring back the quality of our education. So education funding is a problem. I'm a strong supporter, and the only candidate in this race that's a strong supporter of Prop 15, which I think will bring much needed revenue to our schools. I have some of the poorest school districts in the county and the state. In my district, which are also in Senate District 15, in my supervisorial district, and they need help. And that should be a bipartisan effort. And some of my business supporters, in addition to my labor supporters here in this race, have said, we hope you can get to the state Senate and help us figure out how to equalize education funding, how to bridge the divide and stop the fighting between constituencies about things like Prop 15, or how are we going to fund education. So I think that's huge. I think housing is a very similar issue. There's fighting about production and how are we going to produce housing to keep up with job growth, where we're losing that race right now 6-1 in the Bay Area. That's the kind of work where it should be bipartisan. It shouldn't be about Republicans or Democrats or moderates or progressives. It should be about your future, the future of the opportunity for housing, the right that everyone in California has to housing. That really needs to be emphasized, and I'll do that in the state legislature.
Thank you. Ms. Ravel?
I think that all of the issues that face California and face us in this valley need to be bipartisan issues. And I'm not the one in this race who is condemning me for being more like a Republican. I'm the one who believes in talking to all people, talking to all sectors, business, labor, and the community, and finding out what the issues are, what the facts are, what the data is, and find ways to get the best results for everybody. And in my opinion, the only way you do that is by talking both across the aisle and with people who aren't so polarized like some, like my opponent, who will only be with one special interest. what you do is you talk to everybody and try to come to rational, thoughtful solutions that meet people's needs. And that would be true about homelessness. It would be true about housing. It would be true about education. It would be true about climate and the issues that we face regarding climate. And there is no better time to stop the polarization and stop people who are making decisions based on their special interests that support them, and instead try to work with everyone to help your generation get ahead and help change this state.
All right, thank you. Our next question is, California is currently facing a huge housing crisis that has only been exacerbated by the loss of houses during the recent wildfires. There are currently over 150,000 individuals in California that do not have a place to call home. Ms. Ravel, if elected, how would you work to help address the housing crisis?
Well, clearly the housing crisis is urgent, and how I would work to deal with it is, number one, for people who cannot afford homes, there should be either investments in their ability to pay down payments and to become able to live in those homes. And I also think that we need to look at affordable housing. And you're talking about people getting homeless. And some of the bills that have been out, like SB 50, they were not about affordable housing. And we have to look at low income and very low income housing and housing for people who are working in our communities. And I think that one thing is that public entities that have excess land need to provide that land for housing, because the cost of land is very high. And like the county that has a lot of excess housing, excess land, that should be provided. We should invest in more modular housing and make sure that zoning laws are changed so that they can be built more quickly. We have to help fund local governments that can't, like Saratoga and others, that can't necessarily afford some of these things. And we have to change CEQA, which has been used by unions often to hold up housing development.
Thank you. Supervisor Cortese?
As I mentioned earlier, a huge problem that we have is our robust economy here in the Bay Area, which is similar to some other urban parts of California, is producing jobs 6 times faster than housing. And that's not only priced people out of home ownership, where only 14% of the people who live in our county, in our area, or this Senate district can afford to buy a house at any point. But it's also priced people out of the rental market. It's created a very tight rental market with so little vacancy that, if a mom with 2 kids in school in the middle of a semester gets a 30-day notice or a 60-day notice, she's likely to have to take those kids out of school and maybe can't find another apartment or another house to rent in the same school district. That's how tight the market's been. So what we need is production primarily. I think people know that. I did support SB 50. And worked with the author to get amendments made to that bill. So it was a bill that respected local rules like zoning and general plans, while at the same time streamlining the effort. And I will continue to support legislation like that, but I'll also support the creation of a statewide housing finance agency like they have in the state of New York, which has produced billions of dollars of affordable housing by investing in affordable housing with private sector partners, municipal partners, and nonprofit partners to get that done. I led the Measure A program here in 2016. I co-chaired that campaign, and that provides extremely low income and low income funding for housing. And that kind of a bond can be done at the state level as well.
Our next audience question is, student debt is a huge concern for many high schoolers seeking higher education. What is your plan to address student debt if you're elected? We'll start with Supervisor Cortese.
It's a huge issue. As a young person myself who was working for wages too embarrassing to describe to you, I used to work 32 hours a week during my time at both Santa Clara University and the University of California, Davis. But I could afford my own apartment rent and my own groceries and my tuition, believe it or not. And that's where the difference is. The minimum wage is still way too low. It's higher than it was back then, of course. I'm much older than you, but the fact of the matter is it hasn't kept up. And meanwhile, the cost of tuition has skyrocketed. The cost of other costs associated with getting a degree has skyrocketed as well. Housing, the general cost of living, the cost of groceries, the cost of everything has gone up. So we need to get back to making sure that we're subsidizing the California state system and the UC system, particularly our public systems, and start moving, closing that gap and closing the gap between what young people can afford and what tuition actually costs. That's my promise. I want to try to bring it back to where we were when California was leading the nation in terms of its university and college education system. And I think it was in the 60s and 70s. And I think we've had a serious decline, and I don't think that's fair to the future of our young people.
Thank you. Ms. Ravel?
Yes, student debt is an enormous problem, and sometimes the fear of those loans has stopped people from going to the universities or colleges, which I think is really a terrible thing. I was teaching at Berkeley Law School, and I know at Berkeley there were a lot of students who were homeless and also who had issues with food security. And that is absolutely unacceptable. And what I think is a problem is when you look at the state budget, the budget for the university system, the state college system, and even the community colleges system is at the lowest levels of the rest of the expenditures for the state budget. And that cannot continue. I, as a state senator, would insist that we prioritize those budgets and do them in a way that goes back to when tuition would be affordable and give much more money to students of all kinds so that they can take advantage of our public university system or college system. The fact is that I went to law school and I paid $2,000, and I worked my way as a waitress, paid $2,000 a semester for law school. And now that same law school, UC Hastings, is $40,000. That's ridiculous. And we want people to be able to achieve in our state. And that would be a priority of mine, to assure that everyone has accessible ability to get to the colleges without debt that's going to create problems for them in the future.
Thank you. Our next question has been a reoccurring audience question. Multiple deaths of citizens at the hands of police have sparked protests for reform across the country for preventing discrimination against people of color. What do you believe should be done in order to improve police accountability and prevent police brutality in California? We'll start with Ms. Ravel.
Thank you. This is something that I have been very strong on right from the beginning. Number one, we need to have the independent groups, and I've called for this, publicly independent groups that are investigating police issues as well as recommending and having power over the discipline or the removal of police officers. I also, from the beginning, and my opponent does not, believe that we need to be very public about police officers' personnel files when they have been convicted or accused of crimes or other untruthful, improper behavior, so that the public knows that you shouldn't be rehiring those in other police departments. And then finally, I also think that we need to have at the post level, that's the police officer training, which is a state agency that promulgates rules, and the legislature has power over that, about who to hire, how to hire, conditions for hiring people who are not necessarily militaristic, but people who will work in the communities, people who don't have racism in their backgrounds or other criminal activities. And we really must make a difference that way, as well as training. I also believe that we have to change the way we do policing just in general and assure that police are not the only ones going out to calls when there are people who are mentally ill, when there are people who are accused of certain other things, that it should be social workers and mental health professionals that go.
Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Ravel. Supervisor Cortese?
Yeah, thanks very much. I mean, the justice reform has been something that I've worked on for a long time, over a number of years, and I'm happy to see the attention that it's getting now, and the movement, especially among young people, to call for further reform and further change. I think after the murder of George Floyd, that the protests that happened were appropriate. I thought they were intending to be peaceful, especially in our area. I thought the use of rubber bullets and SWAT teams to try to shut down those protests were inappropriate, even in the city that I live in, which is San Jose. And I think part of the reforms that have to go forward, besides transparency, are getting to this issue of tactics. It's not okay for them to use carotid holds, choke holds, and rubber bullets and aggressive, really violent activities when they're dealing with not only public protests, peaceful public protests, but also nonviolent incidents like a DUI or somebody who is suffering from mental health issues, somebody who's unhoused, who's wandering around having a mental health episode. We need crisis intervention people to respond there. At best, community police, but not badges and guns. I have supported and adopted as a county supervisor 8 Can't Wait in our own county, and created an oversight officer in our own county. We're in the process of creating a civilian oversight board for our own law enforcement. Those are all values that I'll carry forward.
Thank you. We are now coming close to the end of this section tonight. This will be your last question and your closing statement. What question do you wish you had been asked tonight, and why? We'll start with Supervisor Cortese.
Well, I think, maybe a little bit more opportunity to speak about background in the beginning. 90 seconds isn't a lot of time, although I think both candidates are getting used to trying to respond quickly and in these kind of formats. But I'm not only from here, but invested here at the level of education, the level of city or municipal government and county government in our neighborhoods, in our schools. I've come out to your schools and to speak with students. I've had that really hands-on opportunity to have my own staff supporting the youth climate strike, for example. We've worked with faith communities through this COVID crisis, which we didn't talk about much tonight, to help them deal with the protocols and the challenges to carrying out their activities safely. But that wasn't unusual for me. That's where I spend my time, with our neighborhoods, with our PTAs, with our faith community, with our schools, with our students. It's what I do. I've been leading a bus trip to Sacramento to fight for education funding for the last 11 years, which is now 5 buses and 300 people, including students, that go every year. And we get a committee room and we call the legislators in and hold their feet to the fire. So I am used to working and tested at working with people here in our community and our neighborhoods. And I'm looking forward to being in the state Senate so that we can continue those bus trips, but this time with me as a state senator. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Ravel?
Thank you. Yes, you did have a question that I thought was really important to answer. And that had to do with what changes are important in state government to make it function better. And there are a few things that relate to whatever my closing will also be, which is I think that it's unfortunate that a lot of people who are career politicians just go because they want another high position. And really what needs to happen at the state legislature is that people who have done things that are just about the community, just about making change in the community, and who aren't there for any reason except to talk to and be involved with the public and make decisions that'll help most people. And the other problem at the state legislature is, of course, because of campaign finance, people are beholden to certain interests and make decisions that way, and that needs to change. But finally, what really I think has to happen is we have to be thoughtful about what the state's priorities are and have someone who's willing to look at those things and make hard decisions independently and thoughtfully. And that's what we're going to need after COVID. That's what we're going to need when there isn't much money at the state and you can't continue to spend profligately like they have at the county and at the state in the past.
Thank you. Cortese and Ms. Ravel, as well as our other speakers tonight. Special thanks to the Campbell, Cupertino, and Saratoga Youth Commissions for hosting this political forum, as well as the City of Cupertino for providing audiovisual support for the forum. Lastly, thank you to our audience for tuning in to learn more about the upcoming election and local issues. We hope that you were able to gain valuable insight through the political leaders that were invited tonight. We encourage teens who are 18 and above to register to vote at registertovote.ca.gov if they have not done so. Voting is important for teens because it allows us to directly impact issues that may affect our lives in the future. Every vote matters, and your vote makes a huge difference in your community and allows your voice to be heard. This concludes Pizza and Politics 2020, and we hope to see you again for Pizza and Politics 2022.